It was back in July that it was reported that the Taliban had effectively shut down all means of income for women. They shut down the beauty salons, which was the last way that Afghanistan women were able to basically work and have some sense of socialization and freedom. And the women tried to protest a little bit, but the Taliban squashed that. So this article was written at the end of July. It's talking about what the Taliban did to shut down all protest, all dissension, because women did still want to work in their beauty salons, and the women did protest. The Taliban said earlier this month they were giving all salons in Afghanistan 1 month to wind down their businesses and close up shop. The Taliban said that they are outlawing salons because they offer services forbidden by Islam and they're causing economic hardships for grooms' families during wedding festivities. In a rare sign of public opposition to Taliban orders, dozens of beauticians and makeup artists gathered in the capital to protest the ban. We are here for justice. We want work, food, and freedom. That's all women are asking for. The purpose of our demonstration was that they, the Taliban, should reconsider and reverse the decision to close beauty salons because this is about our lives. All of us, 50 to 60 women participated. Our slogan was work, bread, and freedom. Because of me reporting on the Taliban and the beauty salon situation, someone suggested that I read this book. And I opened it up, and what women go through globally, it just it's challenging, it's hard. And even though these women are Afghan, I'm going to read pieces of this book that I've gotten to, and the global situation of oppression against women and girls, it can be felt despite the culture disconnect, despite different race, beliefs, religion, all of that. What women go through in that oppression is still heart-wrenching. So let me get into some of this book because I want y'all to really understand what these beauty salons meant to these women. So keep in mind that this book was released in 2007. So the setup was written early 2000 and is coming from a perspective of a Western woman who went over to Afghanistan to help out with a beauty school. In this particular section, a woman asked her husband to bring her back some grapes. This wife couldn't go because she can't just leave the house. So that's the setup. So when this woman, Debbie, asked this man, why can't this woman just go get some grapes? He said, no, 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 they must not leave the house. This woman, Debbie, she says, I was stunned by this. Here I had traveled halfway around the world by myself and was getting ready to make my way through the Kuiper Pass, which is widely considered one of the most dangerous places in the world. Yet Haji's wife called him all the way in Peshawar, and then he called Fahim all the way back in Islamabad to go to the market to get her some grapes. I wondered what these people must think of me. Now the author is talking about how she had to stay with this man and his wives while she was trying to make her way to the beauty school. Okay, so she says, he welcomed me into his mansion, which was one of the biggest houses I've ever seen. Then he pointed to a woman wrapped in a dark shawl who was hovering in the background. Look at my old wife, he said, stroking his beard. He always stroked his beard in a creepy sort of way. I need a nice young one, maybe American, like you. I stood in the living room awkwardly and removed my headscarf. As soon as he left the room, one of his wives came and threw it back over my head. I'd never been in a home where the women had to be covered, even while they were inside. I was hoping to leave the next day, but every day the old Talib kept saying, tomorrow, tomorrow. I wound up spending a lot of time with the women of the house. Some of them were as creepy as the old man. His sister kept snatching things out of my suitcase and pretending they were gifts for her. She got my travel reading light and a pair of shoes that way. But the rest of the women were just sad. Their lives were so boring. They'd cook, clean, and spend the rest of their time sitting in the women's section of the house and painting their hands and feet with henna. By the time I left, I was covered with so much henna that I felt like a circus freak. When they thought no one could hear them, they'd ask me, how they could get out of Pakistan. One of his daughters told me she had been forced to marry a man who lived in London and came back to see her every 2 years just to get her pregnant. Another daughter told me how much she wanted to continue her education, just like her brother. If her father didn't force her to marry, she had hopes of getting a medical degree. But even if she got the degree, she said he never let her out the house, never let her leave the house. It made me sick that she already knew she had no future other than inside the house. One of the old man's pompous brothers was always trying to get me into a debate about Eastern versus Western culture. Our women are so happy, he insisted. Look at them. They have no stress, no tension like women in the West. If you just listen to that part, you know and understand that men globally just don't hear women. And that is the reason why women tell other women's stories, because we listen to other women's stories. Being stuck in the house, not having the opportunity to go to the market to buy your own grapes, to not be able to work, to not be able to just go out and get fresh air is hard on you, and that is stressful, and it is a gilded cage. So, this part of the book is where the author, Debbie, is talking to a woman who is giving part of her life story, and I want to share it with y'all. Basira said that in the late 1970s, the war against Russia was raging near Mazar. Bombs had fallen near the children's school. Her father was a progressive thinker and wanted Basira's two older sisters to stay in school. She herself was only 3 years old at the time, so he moved the whole family to Kabul, where Basira's mother's brother lived. The father found a nice home for them. He performed what is called a garul, meaning that he gave the owner a large sum of money for the house. After 5 years, the family could either get some of the money back or keep the house. After they were settled in Kabul, the father went back to Mazar to conduct a final piece of business, but he never returned. Basira's anguished mother waited for months to hear from him and finally had to assume that he was killed either by the Russians or by the Mujahideen, even though no one ever found his body. She took a job cleaning a school, and eventually all of the girls were students there. In 5 years, the terms of the Garul were up, and Basira's mother decided they should take the money and move to a house that wasn't as nice. Her wages were meager, and the family was becoming poorer and more ragged. Her brother said that he would take care of collecting the money for her. This role was expected of him as the oldest male relative. But when Basira's mother asked him for the money, her greedy brother refused to give it to her and ordered her out of his home, so the family now had no house and no money. Understand that this is what happens when you have men that are consistently in charge. Women have she's basically at the whims of this man who said, no, I'm not giving you your money. By the time Basira was 8, she was still going to school but couldn't live at home. She stayed at the house of one of the teachers and did housekeeping there because her mother couldn't afford to feed her. Basira missed her mother terribly and only saw her on Fridays. But the teacher was kind, as if Basira was one of her own daughters. Soon Basira decided that she wanted to be a teacher. Just recognize Basira was not able to become a teacher. She was sold off to a man basically because her mother couldn't afford to keep feeding her. And by the time she was 14, she was a bride to an older man, a well older man, because women and girls are basically the equivalent of a goat and a servant in many countries across the world. Basically, being born with a uterus means that in many countries you're on par with being a goat or a mule, a servant, and you're supposed to serve these people who being born with a peen means that you're entitled to a servant. But this is just a clip of the book. Okay, not a clip, a section of the book, a passage. This is not the internet. You guys go ahead, jump in the comments. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, share.